Are you panicking about Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver George Pickens? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, for a first deposit match up to $100. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can check her out on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. You can also follow her work at Pro Football Focus. Kate, your Steelers got a big win on Thursday Night Football. But I want to start with George Pickens, who had fewer receiving yards than you and I did last night. He not great with 2 catches for -1 yards. Had a touchdown, just decided not to get his other foot in bounds. Are you panicking at all about George Pickens after back-to-back slow weeks?
I'm not so much I'm not so much panicking about Pickens the player, right? Like I think he's very talented. I don't understand that touchdown failing to get the other foot in. He had like 10 yards in front of him. I feel like it would have been harder for him not to get his foot down with how much space he had than to just get his second foot down. It was a very weird play. So like that, you don't love to see that from like a mental perspective but those are usually toe tapping, like toe tapping is what George Pickens does. So that play specifically doesn't freak me out. What does freak me out a little bit is the fact that we saw, Kenny Pickett, George Pickens connect, when Deontay Johnson was out of the lineup. But the moment Deontay Johnson steps back on the field, it's the Kenny Pickett show, or it's the Deontay Johnson show from Kenny Pickett. And he goes to him over and over and over again. And you know what? Like he makes more consistent plays. So like it's really hard to argue against Kenny Pickett making Deontay Johnson the focal point when, like the phrase that the Steelers love to use is like make routine plays routinely. That's what Deontay Johnson does. Like he provides, I think, Kenny Pickett a lot of stability that George Pickens, maybe he can like take it over the top and make the splash plays, but he really, it's hard to, I think, go to him and expect consistency. And that is what makes me nervous. Like I just had this moment where I was like, all right, well, we're going to see Deontay Johnson come back. And after all this time of being forced to go to other options, we're going to see, Kenny Pickett spread it between George Pickens and Deontay Johnson a little bit more evenly. And that just hasn't been the case.
So I've got mixed feelings in this because he very easily could have had a touchdown in back-to-back weeks, right? He scored one last week against Jacksonville. I mean, 99 times out of 100, he scores, on that play. In this one against the Titans. At the same time, you mentioned Deontay coming back and how that's affected him. 23 total yards over the last 2 games on 10 targets. It's also, these are 2 good matchups for him. Jacksonville and Tennessee have both been decimated in the secondary. No Tyson Campbell for Jacksonville last week. No Roger McCreary, their top cornerback this week. Both of these games at home. And we should mention, no Pat Freiermuth, who we know is going to get targets when he comes back into this lineup. So if he's not producing now with Freiermuth out of the lineup against, good matchups, how is it going to be down the road when they play some better teams and some better cornerbacks? I don't know, but I'm not giving up. I'm not. I think I'm going to buy him a little bit. I think
you talked yourself into a corner here.
I know.
You just talked yourself in a loop.
There's just so much opportunity here. There's so much potential, and you can see with how ridiculous he is at making plays down the sideline. I think the last 2 games are a little bit more of an anomaly than a trend.
So over the last 2 weeks, per NFL Next Gen stats, out of all of the wide receivers, except for Allen Robinson, as well as the tight ends and running backs, No player has averaged fewer yards of separation, 2.5 average yards of separation on plays for George Pickens. Deontay
That's
Johnson,
his game, though. Like
2.7.
we knew that, though. Like he's just not going to create separation.
Okay, so that's not an anomaly. What is an anomaly, though, is like you mentioned, not making those big plays. Now, could part of these anomalies maybe be the fact, and like we're gonna have to disregard the entire first half of week 8 for this to be a actual thing, but Kenny Pickett entered this game with a very painful rib injury, ended up playing, but it was one that forced him from the second half of the game. They were not certain that he was going to be available in this game at all. Any chance, like I think we saw a lot of plays designed to get the ball out a little bit more quickly, utilize those running backs in the receiving game. These targets to George Pickens that fly down the field, those take time to develop. And if you're going to take time to let those routes develop, you're going to risk putting Kenny Pickett in harm's way, up against an opposing defensive line. Any chance that you think maybe this is like a Kenny Pickett health anomaly?
I mean, you could potentially talk yourself into that.
I think it might be a combination of all these things.
Sure.
But
My thing with Kenny Pickett is this is just kind of who he is, right? Like you're going to get 160 to 180 yards a game. You might get a touchdown, and you're probably going to get 3. I think last night he had 3 passes beyond 10 air yards all game long. That's not all that different than what we've seen over the last month or so. Like he just doesn't want to throw the ball down the field. He does not want to throw the ball down the middle of the field unless guys are wide open. Kind of just who he is.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking on that touchdown upside, Kenny Pickett over 20 starts, 13 passing touchdowns.
I believe the last time I checked, he's got the second lowest touchdown percentage of all time among quarterbacks who've started 20 more games.
Yikes.
It's
So
not-
like when you're panicking a little bit on George Pickens, like when you're relying so much week to week on that sort of big play potential, and you have a guy that to this point is like averaging well under a touchdown per game, like you're probably gonna have to take your lumps as long as Kenny Pickett is the quarterback. But
What you
in
can do
terms
when
of,
he's wide receiver 30. Like if
yeah,
he was being drafted as a top 15 receiver, then I'd be really nervous. But you're getting him as a low end wide receiver 2, high end wide receiver 3, and that's why I'm okay with it.
what I'm learning from this discussion is that Kenny Pickett and George Pickens, not so much Kenny Pickett, I guess, but George Pickens has some complicated feelings stirring inside me. Like
I think George Pickens has some complicated feelings about Kenny Pickett, if we're being honest.
we're all
on the
feeling,
sideline.
yeah, we're all feeling the same things here. I do, like, you believe in the talent without a doubt. But circumstances are not ideal for George
No.
Pickens in this outing, unfortunately.
I want to talk about the quarterback on the other side of the ball from last night's game, Will Levis. Now, stats were not great, but I came away pretty impressed from Levis. We will talk about him next. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. It is the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, all you have to do is pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. I absolutely love how many different players and how many different stats that you can choose from. You can choose on how many tackles a player will get. Will they get an interception? Will they catch a touchdown? It's absolutely fantastic. PrizePicks even offers a reboot policy that your entry will stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL, all one word, for a first deposit match up to $100. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. Locked On is kicking up our coverage with Locked On NFL Kickoff Live. Each Friday, Locked On will go live at 2 p.m. Eastern on every Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Host Tanitra Batiste, Jarvis Davis, and Kyle Krabs will break down every game on the NFL slate to get you ready for your team's matchup, your fantasy lineups, your betting angles, and so much more. Plus, get the in-depth local analysis from our stable of NFL hosts across the country who know these teams better than anyone else. Find Locked On NFL Kickoff Live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern on any Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Kate, let's talk about Will Levis in this game. 22 of 39 for 262 yards, no touchdowns. Did throw the interception on the final play of the game. But I got to say, I came away pretty impressed from him. What about you?
Love what we've seen out of Will Levis. Like, I think, first of all, can we just agree to not entertain the idea that when Ryan Tannehill's healthy, he's going to be the star? No, get out of here. Get out of here. Will Levis, to this point, you mentioned didn't throw a touchdown yesterday, but hey, still on the year, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, not too shabby over your first 2 career starts. Throwing for a 96 passer rating. He looks good. He looks so poised, Marcus. And I think that's the biggest takeaway. He has not been afraid to sling it down the field to this point. Like averaging almost 11 air yards per attempt per next gen stats, which is crazy. I think what is I think most incredible about Will Levis is the level of just veteranness that he's playing with. Like literally sacked by TJ Watt without a helmet, like the most savage kind of sack I feel like I've ever seen. And he stands back up. He's playing behind the shakiest of offensive line. I mean, they came in down a starting tackle, and then things just kept rolling from there for this offensive line.
Do you want to guess how many pressures the Titans offensive line gave up last night? Just guess.
I have to guess 20 something.
34.
Ooh, that is brutal for the most veteran of quarterbacks. And you had Will Levis still confidently standing there in the pocket. And he looked unfazed. He looked unshaken. And I think that was what just impressed me so much about Will Levis. Now, from a fantasy perspective, from a fantasy scoring perspective, obviously we've seen that upside, right? The 4 touchdown upside. This wasn't a great matchup. Like, for as much as the Steelers have been, a defense that can give up some big plays. Like they can play some tight coverage. They have that propensity for generating turnovers. So this, I don't think was necessarily the best matchup,
especially on a short week. Like you've got your second starts on a short week in Pittsburgh on a night game. Like that's tough for a lot of quarterbacks. So that's why I came away just really impressed from him in this game.
Yeah, and you know what I think is most exciting for me from regarding Will Levis is some of that upside for fantasy that he has because of the size and the ability that he has to make plays with his legs, which we haven't even seen to this point. In his final 2 seasons coming out of Kentucky, he really knew how to utilize his legs to snag some rushing touchdowns, which we know are so valuable. Didn't always translate to yardage because of those sacks that he would take, but he can generate plays with his legs. And if he does that at this level, we know how much that will translate to, being a cheat code for fantasy, because that's what the situation is, right? And I can't wait to see. I hope we see him utilize some of that rushing ability. Right now, to this point, only 8 attempts, 13 yards, nothing to write home about. But I would love to see them, generate some of those touches. We've already seen them do a lot of that for Ryan Tannehill. We've seen plenty of scrambles and utilizations of Ryan Tannehill or in and around the goal line. Like, this can be a creative team in that regard. So I think there's some really nice fantasy upside here that I'm buying into the hype for Will Levis. I was already high on him for all these reasons coming out, but just to see him look that poised coming out of the gate, it- color me
So
convinced.
I'm with you on the talent. Like, you and I were talking pre-show. Like, if you switch the quarterbacks in this game, Pittsburgh probably wins by 14 or 17
Yeah.
points. Like, Will Levis's arm bailed him out of so many bad situations because of the offensive line. And just, I mean, TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith combined for 17 pressures alone in this game. My one fear with Will Levis actually has nothing to do with himself. I just don't know if Mike Vrabel and his coaching staff is going to put him in advantageous situations to fully utilize his talent. Like, I don't believe in this coaching staff and how they can draw up plays. Like, even the last 3 plays of this game, you're running 4 verts in the red zone. Like, it's just so hard it's so hard to design or to get guys open in that situation. I'm nervous. Like, I'm nervous about what they're going to do to Will Levis. Are they going to try to turn him into a game manager to play a Mike Vrabel style of offense? Or this offseason, are they going to go out and get an offensive coordinator that can, like, fully unleash Will Levis? That's my only real concern here right now.
Well, and if you make Will Levis into a game manager, I think that's kind of just like taking, Spider-Man's superpower. Does Spider-Man have superpowers? I have no idea.
Yeah, he's got the
Like,
web.
okay, is that a superpower though?
I think
Or
so.
is that just like a weird
I'd take
birth
that.
defect? Okay.
Birth defect. No, he didn't. He wasn't born with it. He got it once he got bit by a spider.
Oh my I don't know all the okay, but like you're taking away his spider web maker. Like, if he is Spider-Man and you turn him into a game manager, you're literally just taking his spider web maker, which makes getting bit by a spider just a sad story if you don't walk away with a superpower. So that, like, you would take away everything that makes Will Levis special. What makes him
100%.
special is his arm. He's a gamer. Like, that is his style of football, not Kenny Pickett style of football, which I think Kenny Pickett to this point fits more of that game manager mold. That is not Will Levis. So yeah, if you do that, it's kind of like castration.
Yeah, it's why I'd like to see him get with a more creative offensive coordinator who's going to help him push the ball down the field, because that's where he really thrives, is when he can stand tall in the pocket and throw those, intermediate to deep passes. I'd like to see
And he
the
looks
tight.
so easy doing it. Like,
Yeah. Oh, I mean, the
flick
arm
of the
talent
wrist,
is
man.
ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. So allow him to do that more often and more frequently. We should mention Treylon Burks in this game. He left with a concussion, was walking around the locker room. Seems like he's going to be okay after a really scary moment. But I mean, I know this. It's always tough to try to talk about the fantasy part of this, but 2 for 23 on 3 targets. I just don't know if it's ever going to be a thing in this offense.
Yeah, it's not ever easy to talk about the football portion, but to this point, like, I think generally we can just agree that the experiment of trading, AJ Brown for essentially Treylon Burks has not to this point worked out. Not to say that it couldn't. Like, I think Treylon Burks, a player with a ton of talent, his the way he matches size and athleticism is ridiculous. Like, there's a lot of potential there, and maybe with Will Levis, trying to kind of open things up in this offense, that'll work out. But I don't think, I'm going to compare them to like the Steelers, like DeAndre Hopkins. He's a guy that, like Deontay Johnson, can make those every routine play look routine. And I don't think Treylon Burks is that guy, at least at this point.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. He was being drafted as wide receiver 44 going into the month of October. Gotta believe that's going to change quite a bit over the next few weeks. Okay, let's do our favorite segment of the week. It's promotion commotion time, where we promote players from our bench sometimes even the waiver wire, into our starting lineups in week 9. We will discuss that next. This episode is brought to you by DoorDash. Did the game go to timeout? Time to order in with DoorDash. Is it halftime? That is ordering in time. 2-minute more warning. You got it. That is your cue to order in. Whenever the game clock stops, that's the time to order in with DoorDash. Why root for your favorite team on an empty stomach? Order on DoorDash and save on football watch party favorites. I love DoorDash. We use DoorDash all the time in my family. We've got some outstanding pizza and wing places, including the Corner Bar and Grill here in Corey, PA. It's absolutely fantastic. Kate, where's your favorite place to DoorDash?
Oh gosh, it got to be Katz's Deli. Best tomato soup, best sandwiches here in Houston, Texas. You got to try them out if you're in the area. Only on DoorDash.
All of your favorite restaurants and stores, from retail to grocery, are on the app, so you can shop everything you need to get game day ready. Get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter promo code LOCK23. Again, subject to change, terms apply. But that is 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter promo code LOCK23, subject to change, terms apply. All right, it's our favorite part of the week. It is promotion commotion. Kate, who are you promoting from your bench or maybe even from the waiver wire into your starting lineups this week?
All right. How gross do we want to go?
Oh, it's going to be bad.
All right. Let's start off. Wide receiver, Demario Douglas, 6th-round rookie out of.
I had him too. This is fantastic.
Did you? Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. He's about to get a whole lot of opportunity. Unfortunately, Kendrick Bourne out for the season with a torn ACL. Now, I'm not saying like this is a great pick based on, wanting to invest in this high flying offense, because that is not the case right now for the New England Patriots. This has not been looking good. But they get to face the Washington Commanders in week 9. They've been hemorrhaging fantasy points to the wide receiver position, and they just traded away Chase Young, Montez Sweat. Like, Mac Jones is in the best possible position that he can to deliver a football, I think, as most efficiently as we've seen. Douglas leads the team in PFF receiving grade, leads in terms of like pretty much every efficiency metric. 1.9 yards per route run this season, 5.7 yards after the catch per reception. Even before Kendrick Bourne, we'd seen his role start to grow a bit over the last few weeks. And this is a matchup that, allowing the second most fantasy points to wide receivers, like, there's been a lot of big play potential. Now, Douglas plays primarily out of the slot. A lot of what they've been giving up is in the outside, but I don't know that it's going to matter here if they have no pass rush. Like, this is going to be, it's going to be an interesting matchup. But I'm excited about Douglas, and it not just for this week. It kind of excited to see what he might be able to do down the stretch here.
So you stole my guy. That's all right. I'm going to go to the quarterback position. So this is a brutal week for quarterbacks if you are in a super flex league. I mean, it's just it's terrible the options that you have. I'm looking at a super flex league that I'm in, and I love it. My league is basically said we're not picking up any of these guys. So here are the quarterbacks that are available. I want you to tell me which of these guys you'd feel the most comfortable starting in a super flex league. Tyson Bagent, Jaron Hall, Aiden O'Connell, PJ Walker, Clayton Tune, all sitting on the waiver wire right now.
Oh my God. I probably go with Jaron Hall, which is kind of crazy. Gonna make his first career start. Now, this is my sort of philosophy. Sometimes we'll see when these rookies come out who, we're not game planning for, right? Like this, they've had a week to prep for him, but we still don't really have any NFL tape on him. So that might be one of these situations where, he's able to make some plays just based on the fact that teams haven't adjusted to him just yet and don't have, as much data as the next team that's going to face him down the hall, down the stretch here will. Also like a decent athlete. So maybe we see a little bit of rushing production there. If the reads aren't open, maybe he just takes off down the field a little bit. So it's kind of where I'm sitting. You got to love the weaponry, right? Like, this isn't a great matchup against the run. So I do think there's going to be some passing volume there. I don't know.
I'm
These are
going Clayton Tune if he
oh,
starts.
okay. Okay.
Uh,
Well, you got to
because
share your right reasoning.
he's athletic and passed for a bazillion yards during his career at Houston.
Bazillion.
I mean, that's the if I'm pretty sure the exact number.
Yeah.
It's also, I mean, you're going against Cleveland in Cleveland, but I haven't seen him yet. Very little tape for the exact reasons you mentioned with Jaron Hall. I just get a sneaky feeling that Clayton Tune is going to have one of those like 200-yard, 2-touchdown games with 35 rushing yards and gives you some pretty decent fantasy value. If you're in a tough spot for your QB2, I'm going Clayton Tune, and I'm probably going to regret it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't sound super convinced, which is
It's just
absolutely amazing.
it's just not like, ugh. It's like even if it works out, it's pretty gross. How about one more? I want to go with running back Royce Freeman for the LA Rams. Like it's been pretty clear, I think, that they have a preference here for Daryl Henderson while
Yes.
Kyron Williams is out with injury. But going up against the Green Bay Packers hasn't been the worst matchup against the run this season, allowing the sixth most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs, seventh most rushing yards, fifth most rush attempts for 10 or more yards. Like it's been a fine matchup. And going into this game, I don't think we have any formal update on the status of Matt Stafford with that thumb
I don't think
injury.
he's going to play. There's just no
I
way.
I can't picture it. I have to imagine that maybe the lack of update is again just trying to catch the opponent off guard here. But uh, like, regardless of whether he plays or not, I do think that this is going to necessitate a much bigger focus on the
Agreed.
run, much bigger emphasis on the run. So I think there might be enough room for Royce Freeman and for Daryl Henderson to both get a little run in this game, and the matchup's not too terrible.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every single day. As always, we are free and available on all platforms. Go check us out on YouTube. Go follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Majuk. Also check out her work behind the steel curtain and Pro Football Focus. I'm at Marcus_Mosier, and we'll see you right back here on Monday. Enjoy the games, everybody. It's going to be a wild week 9, and we'll cover it all for you again on Monday.